everyone on behalf of all 5 safeguarding adult boards, and as we have a wonderful turnout already today, I'd like to request that everyone keep their cameras and microphones off for the session. We welcome any questions for myself or the other speakers, but if you'd use the chat function to do this, as there are probably a few too many delegates for putting hands up and down and coming on and off mute. Anything you write in the chat will be visible to everyone, just so that you know. There is an option in Teams to use live captions or subtitles, and these can be switched on by the individual user, and only you'll be able to see those captions, so it's not for everybody else. And just to let everyone know that it will be recorded, and a link to those recordings will be made available within the next few weeks through the Keeping Bristol Safe Partnership website, but also your local Safeguarding Adult Board will have the links to send out. So there will be a little evaluation form at the end of the session. A link we popped in the chat within the last 5 minutes or so. And if you could kindly complete it before you leave, it would be appreciated. It only takes 2 minutes. You will also need your phone for an exercise in today's session. So if you have that to hand, that would be great. So without further ado, we will go into what is professional curiosity. So, professional curiosity is where a practitioner proactively recognises an issue and asks for questions to try to understand what is happening within a particular institution, family, or for an individual. It's important to avoid making assumptions or taking a single source of information and accepting it at face value, especially if it does not feel right. A curious professional will inquire by looking, listening, proactively questioning and challenging all those involved, as well as reflecting on all the information that they've received. To achieve safer cultures and communities, practitioners and members of the community should be professionally curious. We need to recognise signs that harm could be occurring, asking questions to learn more about what is happening, and talking to others within and outside of our organisational context, where necessary, to follow up with concerns. We're now going to watch a short video, as it says in capitals on the title, about how the feelings of professional curiosity can involve your whole body. So I don't know if anyone else, the sound doesn't seem to be on for my one. No, glad it's not just me. No worries at all. Claire, if we come out and then try again, so when we're pushing share, just the include all sound tab to pull across. No worries. It's a little cheesy kind of video around a gingerbread man and how you can feel it within your tummy, within the curl of the toe moments. I'm sure I can send it out. It's only a couple of minutes. A little bit of cheese.
Emily, if you want, we can do it again and play from the start.
Yeah, have a go.
Yeah.
No, I'm not getting any sound, so no worries at all. We'll go back to the presentation, and I can always send it round in the chat if people want to see their little gingerbread man. So what I'd like to move on to now is our next slide, which talks a little bit more about any of potential barriers which can prevent professional curiosity and get in the way of getting the information that we need. So, some of these are held within our own practice, and some can be completed by the service user that we're working with. One of these barriers is confirmation bias. So, this is the tendency to process information that fits your existing beliefs of the person or their situation. It could be because you've worked in a similar case before, for example. But in a complex and time restricted work culture, sometimes making quick decisions with all the information we have can feel more comfortable and save time, although it's not always reaching the correct outcome. We should be conscious not to ignore information that refutes our views. Some people that we work with have had professionals from various agencies involved with them before, some even for a long time, and they may be wise as to what to say to reach an outcome or decision. Similarly, in our practice, we have certain scripts that we know, such as explaining confidentiality to a service user, for example, which we could rattle off without hesitation. Some service users have the same, and there can be multitude reasons for this. So, to be aware of this and asking new styles of questions can help break that usual narrative around disguised compliance. Next, past slide, Claire. Normalizing actions rather than recognizing risk. This can be to meet the confirmation bias we just discussed, or it can be due to a lack of understanding of an aspect of the case from the professional, be it cultural differences or religious preferences, for example. Allowing individuals to disrupt meetings so that difficult topics do not get discussed can be a deliberate act from a service user to avoid topics which could be highly emotive, sensitive, or uncomfortable for the individual to discuss, especially when it's usually in a formal setting with a variety of professionals in attendance. A pre meeting discussion can be beneficial to ease any anxieties the individual may have, or to handle any disclosures in a more personable way, first of all. Being brave and having difficult conversations is an important part of being professionally curious. So be respectfully nosy, be open minded and not taking everything at face value. We may even have to think the unthinkable and believe the unbelievable. What we're going to do now is complete a visualization exercise. So I'd like to invite you, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes. Remember that all those cameras are off, so there won't be an audience of people looking at you. So deep breath in and deep breath out. You're sitting on the bank of a river with fast-moving water separating you from the other side. There's a forest upstream. Leaves and debris float down the river towards you. There's a variety of logs scattered around you and what looks like a large ball of rope by the waterside. You've been told you must create a raft to get to the other side. Let's have a look what's actually in front of us to see what can help us with the task at hand. Are those logs you've just found, they're just some small sticks that you're convinced will work? Have we made them into something bigger than they are because it will be useful for us? Are you assuming better wood is just going to flow down the river because we are by a forest after all? Yes, there's a forest up there, and yes, wood comes from forests. Therefore, you just know you'll get more wood shortly? Are you ignoring some rope by the bank because you don't want to upset someone else by taking it? It could be essential to the construction of your raft, but you don't want to be called a thief or hurt anyone's feelings by using it, so might just be best to ignore it, right? You've been swimming before, so you're completely confident you'll be absolutely fine if you fall in. You've been here before, you know the drill. Swimming is swimming, regardless of your surroundings and the situation at hand. Those whirlpools and riptides are no match for you, so don't worry about it. Have you looked downstream and spotted the bridge? Have we thought to look around and question if we could do this differently altogether, such as crossing this calm and picturesque bridge just a short distance down from us? If you have your eyes closed, please open them because you'll get far more from this presentation onwards if you have them open. And hopefully you can see the point we're trying to make. But if not, I hope you enjoyed some gentle mindfulness for a Monday lunchtime. Next, we're going to move on to an exercise where we're using our phones to explore feelings around professional curiosity. So, I have a case study to read out, And you can choose to picture a service user you're working with if you wish. For the first section, I'm going to read out 13 statements detailing their ongoing support from you. Please listen to them all, and only when we reach the end of all 13 statements, please select the number where you as a professional would feel concerned about them. Please note there's no right or wrong answer with this, and your submission is fully anonymous throughout the exercise. So if I could ask everyone on their phone or laptop, just find phone easier, to jump onto menti.com, that's MENTI, and enter this code 44871479. Just to check it's all working, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little thumbs up sign. If you could click that when you're on, just so that I know that it's worked through. Perfect. Fantastic. So I'm going to read these 13 statements. Absolutely no right or wrong answer, and it is fully anonymous.
Sorry, Emily, could you just add the code again, please, for people?
Oh, it's just at the top of the screen here. So 44871479. And people can jump in. Please only push submit at the end of the scenarios. I don't want to lean other people into the answers. So, number 1, they miss your call, but call you back later that day. Number 2, they come 10 minutes late to an appointment due to roadworks. Number 3, they're quieter than usual in their appointments, but explain that they're tired. Number 4, they cancelled their appointment with you, but booked one for a week's time instead. Number 5, they did not complete the application form despite telling you that they would. Number 6, during their home visit, you noticed lots of unopened post on a bookshelf. Number 7, they don't come to their next appointment and say that they are ill. Number 8, they come to the appointment with a neighbour who's been helping them out with shopping and a few odd jobs around the house. On your next home visit, there isn't as much food in the house as usual, but they say it's because it's Ramadan and so they're not eating throughout the day. Number 10, they answer your call and you can hear a lot of people in the background despite them living alone. They say it's their brother's birthday party. Number 11, they don't answer your next call but text you instead. Number 12, they don't come to your next appointment and don't say why. And finally, number 13, their phone is no longer connecting. It's interesting to see them go up and down as we go through. And I'm glad sort of number 1 wasn't too much of a concern with sort of missing a call, or else we'd be permanently doing referrals here, there and everywhere. But it does seem that number 6 has really spiked a lot of people's interest, the home visit and the unopened post on a bookshelf. Maybe it's because it's on a bookshelf that it hasn't just been left, it's been picked up and deliberately put to the side. Because a lot of these could be very easily missed within the day-to-day running of work. We can't run to every conclusion because someone is slightly late. Sometimes things just happen, and a lot of these have arguably normal kind of responses, but put them all together and it shows quite a different picture. Number 6 definitely seems to be the big one. Thank you. What we're going to move on to now, we're still on this Menti, is what about your selection made you feel something wasn't right? So what were you concerned about, or what feeling did you experience? Because everything that I said came with a rational reason, right? So why were people worried? What didn't feel right, or what sparked your concern? Oh, danger. Yep. It's interesting, just that curious why. I suppose that's why we're here to discuss that professional curiosity. Uneasiness. I love that as an answer. That's definitely something you can't tangibly hold on to, but is very, very, very important. Need to be more curious. That's why we're here. And that gut feeling. There's a couple of mentions not being normal or out of the ordinary, something not quite right that we can't put our finger on. Oh, there's such a range. All this professional interest. I like the why has come out a couple of times. And definitely something about them being different. The power in a relationship, that's lovely from a professional and a service user. Just being out of character for them implies you really know the service users that you're working with, and the escalation from previous. Thank you. That's such a wide range. The last one we're going to move on to is acting on that feeling. So I feel confident to act on nothing more than a feeling within my own practice, range from strongly disagree to strongly agree. In my organization, there are processes and leadership support to escalate an issue based on a feeling. And I am confident in the ability to challenge others based on, again, a feeling. Oh, out the gate strong. Okay, all cool, sitting at the same sort of level at the moment, which is in the positive side, which is good. Because it can be quite hard, that feeling when there isn't something tangible, isn't something concrete. We've got a lot of confident professionals, and that's good. Especially the ability to challenge others based on a feeling. You wouldn't want sometimes to feel sort of silly or dismissed by coming with nothing more than a feeling for other professionals. Definitely sitting up at the positive, so that's really good news. Lovely, thank you. And thank you for partaking in that. What we'll do is I can take pictures of those so that we can see the word clouds and see where people were kind of sitting on those areas of concern, and circulate those with the link for this. So now we're going to have a bit of time with Rob Byles, who's a senior practitioner within Bristol Adult Social Care, to kind of talk about professional curiosity within everyday practice. So Rob, hope you're on.
Yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic. So I suppose I'm sort of going to open it up as an interview would for, so what does professional curiosity mean to you within your practice?
It's a good question. I suppose it's why we're all here. I would say that professional curiosity is about recognizing that you don't always know the situation as well as your knowledge might trick you into thinking that you might. You don't know what you don't know. And sometimes I think as professionals, it can become very easy to rely on evidence and written information or observed information that comes in rather than those gut feelings or hypothetical thoughts about what we've seen and what we've observed, just taking things at face value rather than drifting further. So I think professional curiosity is the ability to free yourself to think in that way rather than being bound to just the evidence that you're taking in during your work or practice.
It's interesting. It's kind of that not being tangible or sort of a holdable entity that you can really use. I suppose within your practice, for sort of examples of when you've used it, do any spring to mind?
Yeah, there's definitely a few. I would couple of examples I wanted to share. One is from my day-to-day work right now. We One of the main things I do in my role is we're setting up something called an adult multi-agency safeguarding hub, which is a way for multiple agencies to share information very quickly to make decisions about high-risk safeguarding cases as they come in during the week. It's meant to be a quick decision-making process, a quick way to get professionals around to talk about the cases that are most concerning. And in adult safeguarding, it's our job to see the referrals first and put these referrals forward for multi-agency discussion. And I think one of the things that I have learned most from doing that is that I can sometimes be surprised by what information comes out when we put that information forward. Going back to what I said earlier about you don't know what you don't know. If we put a referral forward for the police to share information, say about somebody who we're concerned is delivering risky or dangerous care within a care home setting, the police have information to check whether that person has actually committed the same sort of neglect-based crimes around the country. Information that we wouldn't have access to in social care, GPs wouldn't have access to, all the usual places where we check for information on a daily basis. We just wouldn't be able to see that. And this multi-agency safeguarding hub gives us the opportunity to ask those questions of the police, just the simple, are there any risks? Is this person known? Because if you don't ask, sometimes you really don't get.
Yeah, it definitely feels that joint working comes into such a large bit where you've said you don't know what you don't know. And I suppose uncovering some of the things that come to light through asking those questions can sometimes be a bit of a concern as well, and not always maybe the happy ending you would initially want.
Yeah, very, very much so. A really good example of that was from when I worked in a previous local authority. This example is pre-COVID. We were all working co-located, and we were on duty one day, and we'd come in after the weekend, and there was a referral from a neighbour about their neighbour, we'll call him Graham, had been behaving unusually around some bins just prior to the weekend. Another duty social worker had tried him on Friday. We tried him on Monday. We got no response. And we checked our health agency database. They hadn't had any response either. So we decided to go out and see him. No response at the door. So my colleague let herself in via key safe. I was back at the office and I got a tearful telephone call to see that he had passed away, sadly, and that we hadn't been able to see him and put services in before he had passed away. Later, it came out that he died through natural causes. But I think even though that on the surface seems like a really sad and negative outcome, it's the lessons that you take from those sorts of situations that make us better practitioners. It was a difficult moment for that social worker and for me, but a reminder of the importance of perhaps if you do act on those, on the instinct that something might be wrong here, the behaviour is unusual, we can't get contact, let's go out. Sometimes you might be just early enough rather than too late.
Definitely, and that is one of the difficulties within the job. Is it may be that hesitation of going out because you don't know what you're going to find. Are we going to open a can of worms unexpectedly? But it's the idea that it would still be happening in the background if we hadn't uncovered it
Yeah.
altogether. Um, that's not the outcome you would like, but I suppose the professional curiosity was there to be able to say something is not right. I suppose that's not always the case with professional curiosity. You can think it and be wrong. sometimes as quite the opposite. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yes, think it be wrong, and along with that, think it and your initial thoughts don't take into account what the person at the center of this feels themselves. And for me, that's as good as being wrong, right? We need to be putting the people that we're working with, particularly in safeguarding, where the aim is to make safeguarding personal. They need to be at the center of what we're doing, and we can make assumptions that just a way off what works for the person, even if it might be uncomfortable for us. This example has some graphic elements that I will steer away from, but I think it's a good example of this. In a again, this is a safeguarding example. Most of what I've done in my career has been safeguarding, and I was visiting a care home in a previous authority on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent, and this care home was for people who had physical disabilities, and there was a couple there who had chosen to strike up an intimate relationship within the care home. Both were physically disabled through a stroke, and initially they'd been supported by care staff to have this relationship, a physical sexual relationship, to be hoisted into position so they could be intimate in that way. But after a further stroke, we'll call her Mary for David and Mary. So after a further stroke for Mary, she lost more feeling in her lower body. And during a sexually intimate episode, David struggled to understand that, and it resulted in Mary being quite seriously hurt. She couldn't feel what was going on, and David wasn't able to process what was happening. It was deemed to be accidental, but she was hospitalised. And this was quite concerning for the care home and for professionals. There was no family involved for Mary, but she was someone who was thought to have mental capacity. And her social worker met with her. I was David's social worker. Mary had a separate social worker, and asked her about the situation and what she wanted to do and how she wanted to to stop it from happening again and protect herself. But it turned out that because of Mary's history of being a sex worker, harm in sex was very normal for her. And so she really wanted to continue with this intimate sexual relationship, despite the fact that it was actually physically harming her. I won't go into the longer details, other than suffice to say that David was found to lack capacity, and in the end, we did put some protective measures in place. But it was really interesting that actually the person who needed protecting still wanted to be exposed to that harm, and we had made assumptions, and the social worker and I had made assumptions that actually she'd want to be protected, but her background meant very different for her.
Such a complex example with multi layers of physical disability but mental capacity, and the assumptions that were made turned out actually not to be within the person's best interests. And that's what we're striving towards. So what a balance of kind of risk and choice and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Was there anything else you wanted to add, sort of around professional curiosity within the work environment, within your own practice, before we come to a close?
I think it is something that it's just really important to keep talking about with colleagues and keep reminding each other about. I think sometimes that's why things like this are so good, is that it's something a lot of us will say that we know and we feel that we do, but if we don't keep talking about it, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And I think that sometimes that can happen a little bit with professional curiosity, is that when we think about ourselves, we think we use it, but if we're not talking about it, if we're not evaluating how we're using it, not reflecting on how we're using it, then just like any other skill within these professions, we can find ourselves relying on on data or on written feedback or on written referrals, when actually those are just one part of our toolkit, and this gut instinct stuff is so important to help us uncover things that otherwise might not be uncovered.
No, thank you. And it seems odd to be running a sort of training session and openly saying that none of this should be brand new to anyone. The idea of professional curiosity should not be new. There's a difference between a training and a refresher, and maybe looking at it through a different lens as opposed to being taught how to.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today, Rob, and those real life examples of just bringing this concept into daily practice. So what we're going to look at now is some overall points, which you may already do or could consider adopting moving forward under the basis of look, listen, asking, and checking out. So firstly, question your assumptions about how individuals and families function. As professionals, we carry life experiences as well as previous experiences within a professional setting, and we're not immune to making biases or assumptions. But by asking yourself, where did I get this information from, can make you aware of whether you were told it or whether you've inserted it into the narrative. So especially watch out for that over optimism if it fits your initial assumptions that you previously made. Secondly, to demonstrate a willingness to have challenging conversations despite how tricky these may feel. So this can come with time, practice, but even guidance from other professionals, such as our colleagues. We can show both empathy and compassion whilst being real and honest with a service user. Next is to address any professional anxieties about how a hostile or resistant individual or family might react, especially with regards to being asked these difficult or direct questions. I would strongly hope that no one goes into our lines of work to deliberately upset or anger anybody, but sometimes it does happen, and this can be through no fault of our own. Seeking support from colleagues or preparing for meetings with difficult conversations in advance can help you to feel confident with how you will present this information and can alleviate your anxieties, maybe even reduce the likelihood of experiencing difficulties from an individual you're supporting. Ensuring that your practice is reflective. Now, this can be through having access to good quality supervision and training opportunities, but also using other colleagues to work through those more challenging cases, like the complex ones that Rob spoke about. Next one to think about is you can be wrong, and that is okay. We're not perfect and we do make mistakes, even with the best of intentions. As long as you've documented your reasons behind a decision and approached the situation with the empathy and compassion, then it can be a clear, caring, and justifiable reason for the action or decision that was taken or one that wasn't. The style of your record keeping also links with this next point to consider how to articulate intuition into an evidence and professional view that can be shared with the service users you support. As practitioners, we have a significant part to play in constructing the narrative around a person or family. So here are some questions to ask ourselves within our work. How am I feeling? Tired? Feeling rushed? Unwell? It may be easy to initially overlook these, but think about how it might impact your view of the person on any given day. Do I hold biases towards an aspect of this situation or of the individual themselves? Now, this can be quite a direct reflection onto the practitioner, and some may not feel fully comfortable with it. But we do hold unconscious biases to some degree within some aspects of our work. Being aware that we hold these and trying to address them is not the problem, but outright refusing that we could never hold any biases can be a big issue. Why might this person not be telling me the whole truth? So there's a plethora of reasons for this, and it can be range from deliberate deceit and disguised compliance all the way through to the fear and consequences of telling the truth. Maybe threats from others if they were to speak up, or a general distrust of professionals. What additional vulnerabilities are at play here, and what could lead an individual or their family to not be completely honest with you? What do you need to explore? Am I confident with a range of cultural differences and asking this person about them? There can be a fear of being labelled as something you're not by not fully understanding the differences and dynamics within a family you're working with. And as much as training opportunities are available to educate professionals on some of these differences, there'll be times where you need to ask to fully understand. As long as it's approached with sensitivity, genuine interest, and handled appropriately, it's actively encouraged professionals to do this. Am I considering the concerns in isolation or cumulatively? As shown in the case study we looked at earlier, each individual statement on their own could easily be lost in the busy day-to-day and not followed up on fully. However, looking at it all together could indicate a very different picture. Are other professionals experiencing similar issues or concerns with this individual? Talk to each other and find out. It could lead to a change required to improve your working relationship with the individual you may not have even thought about. Could also uncover a risk they've not disclosed to you yet, such as the location of your meetings, for example. If nothing else, it will improve the working relationships of their professional network to effectively support that individual. Lastly, how would I respond to others being professionally curious about my own practice? So in the case study earlier, we thought about how confident we are to challenge based on feelings. But if the tables were turned on our own practice, how would we respond? We have the right to question and challenge, but so do other professionals involved. It can be easy to resort to challenge being seen as confrontation or even unfair, but maybe we could look at our reaction to this through the lens of improving that holistic support for the individual and their family. Earlier in the presentation, we touched on disguised compliance and comfortable narrative that people deliver to each other. So for the next slide, we've got some questions that service users may not have been directly asked before and might require them to think more about their answer and therefore open opportunities for new information to come to light. How do you spend a typical day? It's slightly different wording to what have you been up to, as it allows for a closer look at the mundane day to day, as opposed to a recent exciting incident they've been involved with. It can show you their interests and their routine, and there can be just as much shown by what they're not doing as what they are doing. When were you last happy? Now, the answer to this could be this morning when I saw my dog. It could show the clear positive relationship their person has with their dog, which is clearly something important to them, and discussing this at future meetings could strengthen your professional bonds. Or alternatively, it could be a longer time ago than that. So instead of, how are you? Good, thanks, you. Yeah, good. Question and response that some of us here may be guilty of after a weekend, asking about happiness exactly can be much more emotive and hold a vulnerability in some people. If it's been a while since the person has felt happiness, asking about the last time and what made it so, what made them feel that way, can show you a lot about their interests, their values, and their connections. When do you feel safe? Now, safety can be taken in many contexts in this question: physical safety, emotional safety, even psychological safety. And this ambiguity is deliberate, so the individual has complete freedom to answer this question. They may mention a specific individual or a special location to them. This question can be to improve professional connection, but also to explore risk indicators depending on their response. A lack of professional curiosity has featured in multiple safeguarding adult reviews where someone is harmed or died through abuse or neglect. So ascertaining safety can literally be the difference between life and death. For more information about safeguarding adult reviews, South Gloucestershire are covering this in their Stop Adult Abuse Week session on Friday. What do you look forward to? So this question is covering future plans, aspirations, and events that bring joy regardless of size or significance. It can give you a clearer idea of what is important to them or an area of their life that they wish to get past. Similarly to others in the list, there can be much more information given in what is not said, And at this point, we could look at what support options could be put in place or what's stopping the individual looking forward. The last one, what is the function of their behaviour? So this is a slightly different question, as you wouldn't necessarily ask it directly. It's thinking about why they're doing what they are doing and asking from a new perspective. For example, what is the best thing about your substance use? This can really surprise people, as the much more common line from professionals involves what issues it's causing, or why won't they stop, why won't they access treatment. The reason behind this seemingly unhealthy behaviour can help you understand more about them. They could be using substances, it helps them forget something painful. It could stop auditory hallucinations, or it could help them detach from what is currently going on in their life. And this is your way in. Understanding the function can uncover professional concerns that could have gone unnoticed while the focus remained on the behaviour at hand. All of these questions seem straightforward, but when you understand the reason and the rationale behind them and what you're trying to get at, they're a facade to the information that's behind them and all of the wealth of risk assessment that they can actually give you without even knowing with their responses. So now we move on to your questions. So thank you very much for your time, your attention, and your participation today. So we're going to take any questions either for myself or for Rob, and those are included in the chat, which I know Claire is supporting with. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is a 2-minute evaluation that I'll pop into the chat, and any feedback would be greatly appreciated. But I wanted to check with Claire, and we'll start with the chat, and then by all means, feel free for anybody to pop their hand up.
There are no questions in the chat, Emily.
Okay, that's nice and easy. Does anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask either myself or Rob around professional curiosity? Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of tips on how you would express sort of your gut feeling to other professionals, to sort of when you don't have that tangible evidence, but your gut is telling you, or you know, there is difficulties communicating quite that risk to other professionals, certainly when there's sort of addiction issues in play as well, how to get over just how concerned you are without kind of seeming a little bit hysterical?
It's a fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is. I suppose for me and my profession, what I would think about doing it is being quite honest and quite vulnerable with other professionals. If people have a good grasp of professional curiosity, then the hope is that they would look to meet you there. And if you have a good joint working relationship within the support network, it can be great to latch onto, and being quite open and vulnerable and saying, I've just got this feeling, I'm not quite sure why. Something like a supportive colleague or a manager or a great joint working relationship, it's unlikely that they would knock you down beforehand. But it's brave. It is brave. And I'm not sure anybody would say, ignore it, because then if something goes wrong, potentially you can think where that information came from. Rob, did you have another response?
It's more to add to that, really, because I think that really, honestly, really underpins it. I think there's 2 practical things that I would think about when raising this with others. I would always do it over written communication, because I think sometimes when expressing how you feel about a gut instinct or risks that might happen, I think sometimes to minimize that risk of appearing hysterical, to use your language, to take the time over it, plan how you're putting your messaging across, I think can really enhance the chance of somebody taking it on board, rather than when you've come back from seeing something, you can see the risks and it's really you're quite heightened, you really want to share that. I would go away, take a few minutes to write it down and plan it, and then you can have a follow-up conversation verbally afterwards. But I think that time to sort of regulate and help you process how you're going to communicate it can be really valuable. And the second thing to think about is, particularly when it's something where there isn't evidence, is to use that language of risk. And when we think about the second part of the safeguarding criteria for adults in section 42 is about someone experiencing or at risk of abuse or neglect, it's leaning, I think, on that and take it back to the, if it's a safeguarding issue, the criteria, use the language of risk, and use the frameworks around it to support doing that. But it's there to help you to use it.
There's something about your own confidence within yourself and your own practice. You are an experienced practitioner, and that gut feeling is very real. That's okay. Balancing on the fact that I can do it in a caring, compassionate, professional way, and also the fact that it could be wrong. I like Rob's point about sort of writing it down, because when we talk, sometimes we can over hedge on sort of, oh, well, it's probably nothing, but I probably shouldn't. And it diminishes the fact that actually this is a significant risk that has built inside you. So a confidence and a vulnerability, which can be hard, but that doesn't mean that it's not going on. Thank you. Great question. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to ask or to comment? It's me working with the silence, but I'm going to go with that. If anyone does think of anything, obviously there is the chat function, or by all means get in contact with your business manager for the adults, and we can always pass on questions and get back to you. Thank you again for your time on your Lunch and Learn. Hopefully you took something away. It may be a new way of thinking. It may be something that you already know but want to add into your practice. And yeah, hope you have a lovely, lovely rest of the day, and going to engage with far more of the sessions throughout our Stop Adult Abuse Week. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Em.